yeah, just have those conversations early with your builder, and yeah, it's a lot about the builder that you select that's open, understands those things. I know a good friend of mine, his daughter's building a home and selected a young builder who, they're both aligned. They've got a designer in the city. They want to build sort of a low impact, smaller home. And it's just a matter of getting people aligned on what you're doing. And yeah, you can get a great outcome.
Well, Michael, it's fantastic to have you back on the podcast with your next update about your project. Now, you're already under construction, so we're going to be tracking back a little bit to, I suppose, help listeners understand about the process that you went through actually selecting your builder and then navigating getting ready for construction to make sure that you were across the level of specification that you wanted, the elements that you wanted included, the budget that you were going to spend, and the quality that you're going to achieve. And I know that you were super careful and investigative in terms of the level of research that you did into your builder selection. And being in Western Australia, there is a very large predominance of the volume builder industry there, more so than other states of Australia. I believe the stats are in most states of Australia, volume builders make up about 25 to 27% of building stock, whereas in Western Australia, I believe it's around more like 40%. So I know that when you were investigating getting this new home built, you were weighing up whether to use a volume builder or whether to work with a more custom builder. Can you talk through how that kind of thinking was working for you? And I suppose start to talk about some of the research that you were doing, the early conversations that you were having in making that choice for who would actually build this home for you and how you were going to work with them.
Yeah, I guess going right back to the start, we sort of had a budget, and then we went through the design phase, progressed in the first 12 months pretty much to the base of what we had, and then we basically went to the quantities surveyor and had an estimate done on the build, and it blew us away at the costing with the escalation in costs that I think everyone appreciates. It's been crazy 3 or 4 years. So then we sort of looked at it, and our designer said, how about, he recommended a couple of sort of volume builders. One was a larger state-based builder that sort of builds a lot, or has quite a diversified business, a number of different building companies. And so we went to one of those, and then we went to another local volume builder. And we had our design quoted. We specified that it was to be the design, and we wanted to maintain the integrity of the design. And so we had that done, and it was significantly below our quantities surveyor's costing. And we had the conversation. We sort of then went to trying to look at areas of cost saving with the builder, that our preferred builder. But the difference was quite significant. So both quotes came in from those builders, and they weren't very far apart. They're about $40,000 apart. So it was pretty close. And so then we sort of talked to the bespoke builder a bit more, and then we sort of spent a while making some changes and looking at areas where we could reduce costs, which certainly you came up with some good ideas, and they actually really aligned with the feedback that we were getting from our preferred builder on areas of roof pitch and wall height, and openings over doors, different areas like that, structural type costings. So we did a bit of that probably for 6 months, and then we were sort of expecting the shortages of supply and the COVID sort of related issues in the industry might slowly start to abate, labour shortages and that sort of thing. And then we basically came back to the one of the volume builders, and we kept talking to our preferred builder, and he was giving us feedback on design and different things in different areas. So with the local volume builder, we were trying to drill down to get accuracy of, selections and make sure all the inclusions were what we wanted. So there's a fair bit of to and froing. So they sort of re-quoted, and then I think we made a couple of changes. We looked at putting a rammed earth fireplace in, and there was a couple of, changes that came into it. And then so we kept that conversation going. But then when it got to the point of, getting close to signing a contract, we were making sure that we were ticking everything off within the contract. It seemed like every time we went back to see what they'd quoted, there was always a few things that were missing or they didn't quite align. And I think the difficulty with, the standard volume builder type contract is, they lay everything out up front. So you have to basically have all your inclusions, everything pretty well mapped out, which, we went pretty thoroughly through all of that, but there was still a few little things to tick off. And then, of course, a lot of that, after you sign your contract, then you go on and you drill down into those things. And so we progressed that. And then obviously building a healthy home was important to us. And I've been looking into, the new building codes and requirements for, managing moisture and vapor permeable membranes and that sort of thing in the wall structures. And I started having that conversation with the volume builder. And, we were getting very close to probably signing a contract if we could tick these other things off. And I think the conversations about meeting those requirements, because they basically use contractors, then will their contractors actually be able to give us that's changing their systems? So I think they just got to a point where they looked at this, and I think they'd sort of moved away from some of their first home owner and to more of custom builds and that sort of thing. And I think they'd had a couple of good sign-ups, and we had some timelines that we wanted to meet. And then we got a phone call from them saying, we probably can't meet your timelines. And we'd still been, having the conversation with the other builder. And what was happening is we were getting more of our inclusions brought into and it was being requoted. It was requoted 3 times, I think, over a period of probably ended up 12 months from the initial quote, that it crept up a couple of $100,000. And I think we got to the point, I just rang the builder that we'd been talking to, and he'd kept, sort of pushing us back. It was going to be middle of last year, and then it'll be, maybe start in October. And we just rang him up and said, look, we just want to get on board and get this going. So then we just, progressed that. And my wife and I are so pleased that we went with the custom builder, because the quality and the conversation about everything, it's a very open conversation. And so that's actually, I think, going to bring us a much better quality build. And so, lines on a page, and then just being able to watch it evolve and then walk through a home when the frames are up and just get a feel for it and that sort of thing. I think that, that's really helped us. Just, the design hasn't changed, and I think it's a very good design. We're very pleased with the design. It's just a few of those little finer points. We might have dropped a sill down here and there, or we narrowed a couple of windows up in, a couple of bedrooms, just a few little minor things like that.
Fantastic. I remember there was that a lot of toing and froing over that time, and you weighing up, could you get the outcome that you wanted with the volume builder? And Western Australia, of course, before we jumped on, we were chatting about the fact that it's not adopted any of the changes to the National Construction Code 2022. It's saying that it won't bring them in until 2025, at which point we'll have a new National Construction Code series of updates that will start rolling out as well. So did you find that, you mentioned wanting to create a healthy home, wanting to manage moisture. I know that you had a couple of conversations with me in the Facebook group about how do I have a respectful conversation with the builder about this? I've done this research and I've discovered this. How do I have a respectful conversation with them about this to see if we can incorporate it? How did you find, in terms of the contrast between the two builders, that custom builder versus the volume builder, in terms of their receptivity, I suppose, to those conversations about the way that the specifications that you were wanting, the things that you were wanting to include, and the research that you had done. Was that very different between those two different types of builders as well?
There were two really completely different conversations. Certainly with the volume builder, the building manager, so he normally managed their larger project and managed the overall side of the building. He was happy to take our build on and to be the site manager and that sort of thing. So we were able to have some sort of direct conversation with him. And he had built a similar type home. He'd sort of moved down to Albany and sort of been with that business for about 5 years, and I think he just become a part owner in the business. So he was pretty vested in all of that. So I think the conversation was good, but where we sort of had some roadblocks in that conversation when it came to some of these areas that maybe they felt that their contractors, they might have resistance from their contractors to fulfill those obligations of, building to NCC 2022 standards, which still aren't in Western Australia and won't be until May next year, I think. Whereas our other builder, we certainly didn't follow your blueprint. We signed a contract before we had finance in place. I mean, we just had a frank conversation. We used our rural bankers, which were very slow, but we knew that we would get finance, and we wanted to progress so we could get started sort of late last year. And we just said to him, look, we don't have finance done yet, and we're wanting to get the building application in and that sort of thing. And he said, look, it's no good to me if you haven't got finance, we'll just tear the contract up. So, we just took it at his word. And the conversation, I mean, we probably should have had those conversations with him there and then. And we started having those conversations through the build, because he's a very highly respected builder. And we obviously, as far as your initial question, that's why I asked it, because, who's me, a farmer, to tell a builder to spend his life, with the skills and the management. And it's a very complex, there's so many decisions being made in the background that we're not aware of. He uses James Hardie products, and, he's always very careful that he does it to builder's specifications, so there's warranty and no issues like that. So I just thought, right, when it comes to the wall specifications, I just have to go to the James Hardie site, and there's two options there, either, direct fix or with a cavity fix. So I just knew then that was a system that would satisfy those NCC 2022, and he could get his warranty and work with the supplier. And the email went out in the evening, and I think we arrived on site the next morning, and he didn't look like a happy camper, but by lunchtime he said, look, that's fine. And I think he'd had a conversation with one of his trades on site that I think he'd had for 3 months. He used to work for a German builder, local German builder, that, he understood a lot of that sort of stuff. And he said, look, and then there was a phone call to the Hardie rep, and, that's fine. We can progress that. And there's been a few little issues with some of the vertical cladding. I think we're using oblique, and there's a specific batten that wasn't very heavy duty that James Hardie had at the time. I'm trying to think, castellated battens they're called. So the builder wasn't happy with that, and James Hardie have actually now released, a heavier duty batten. So, it's a matter of sometimes there's a few issues and you find solutions as you go forward.
Can I ask you where your designer was in this? Had your designer sort of finished up once they'd done the plans, and then a lot of this was being navigated directly with the builder and you? What role did your designer play in terms of that team structure as you were navigating these contractual negotiations and then into the build?
We pretty much did that ourselves. I think there was a couple of things we just went back to the designer. I think when James Hardie's Stria used to be available, I think in a 255 and a 300 or something like that, and the 255 wasn't available. And then oblique was, so we wanted to keep that slimmer profile. So the obliques seemed to be that. So we ran that past him. What do you think is the best thing here? And I think on got a design, a couple of things that hadn't really properly been ticked off. So we went back to him about that. And then apart from that, not a lot. I think there's an interesting dynamic between the builder and the designer. They both respect each other, but the designer actually was a labourer for the builder
Oh,
in his
wow.
early days. So I think that changes the dynamics a little bit. So yeah, but I think they both respect each other, but it definitely does. We tried to get the builder into the room with the designer, and that didn't happen. It would have been 10 times I probably met with the builder to get feedback on the design. But I think a lot of that on site, a few little complicating issues. We haven't had any major ones, but there's been a few little ones around gutter alignment and a few different things and just a few solutions that the builders come up with something that's more practical. And that's where a few of those conversations in the design phase is probably, helpful to make a freer flowing build process.
I've something that I've noticed about you, Michael, in working with you as we've navigated, both inside home method and then in the consults that we've had along the way as well, is that you always dive in boots and all to kind of understand the nuts and bolts of things. And you've never been fearful of just picking up the phone and asking a company a question or reaching out to somebody who you think could offer some helpful information about something that you're trying to wrap your head around. Have you always been like that, or is that something, because obviously navigating a construction project can be nerve-wracking for some. Is that skills that you have in other areas of your life that you've applied to this, or have you sort of found, that love of research, that love of understanding things in terms of how that's worked through in this experience?
I suppose right at the start, when we actually started the process, I wasn't engaged. My wife said, "Oh, look, you should you should get on Pinterest." And I thought, well, you'll be the one that'll, the house. It's going to be the finishes and all that sort of thing will be your job. And then, I sort of thought, oh, okay, I'll jump on and have a look. And then that's where I discovered Undercover Architect, and I think it was a color bond or whatever, ad or something like that. I just looked into that, and so then it's sort of after listening to your podcasts and then, thinking, oh, there's a lot in behind this, and just wanting to understand the building and what we're getting and why. So yeah, I just really got engaged in that. And I suppose I always enjoy understanding what I'm doing and a wealth of knowledge, but I really enjoyed the process. So that's sort of, and we want to end up with a house that's, it's going to last us out and hopefully last 50 plus years. So we want it well built, and we want it a healthy home, and we want it, it's designed on solar passive principles. So we want it to work so that, we can keep our energy costs down. And yeah, so that was pretty important. So it's probably meant that I've, picked up the phone. And one thing I probably found later on, and then I realised, was, Sustainable Builders Alliance. I thought, geez, there's a wealth of knowledge here, and there's, really enjoyed a lot of their webinars and podcasts. And obviously Brian Guinan is local to WA, and he's the voice behind the podcast. And so I think when we got to a point where it was, how do we manage, I didn't understand, how do you manage moisture in the roof? It seemed like no one was really addressing that. They were addressing walls, but there wasn't much information. And gradually that all sort of came together. And Brian being Passive House, and I think, he does woofie analysis, and he's a pro climber rep. So, I started asking him, should we do a woofie analysis, and, do we have ventilated cavities in the roof and vapor permeable membranes? And then he said, well, there's nothing in these drawings that tell me how I can do it. You need to have ventilation. Where's all this drawn in? So then that So then I looked further into those areas, and then I was, sort of ended up going to Procter Group. I think they were one of the early ones. They brought some New Zealand systems in. So there's been a lot of a learning curve in a lot of those areas. A lot of, I think, New Zealand principles have been brought into Australia with the change in the construction codes. So I've just found that really interesting.
What did you end up doing with your roof construction in terms of having it airtight or having it ventilated? What did you end up landing on?
We ended up not going with the ventilated roof cavity. I got some quotes for some different things. The one thing the builder said is, look, we'll have to go back. We'll have to have all of this rated. We'll have to, basically, it'll slow down the building process. We might have to stop for a while he gets his head around this, because it was sort of coming in, I think pad down, starting framing, probably about pad down stage, I think. And I could see it's been very dry in Western Australia, and I just thought we need to get the frames up, the roof on, and I didn't want to get into the winter and find we've got issues with, a lot of weather and, just trying to get dry days. And I just thought it was more important just to get the roof on, get the house, sort of closed in, and just try to make sure while the wall frames were dry. That was actually possibly more important than, going down that vapor permeable path. But I think there is ways that we can still manage the system that's been put in place. I mean, they put a lot of extra battens in. We've got a 30-degree pitch on the roof, so I think a lot of moisture is going to end up in the gutters. But it is an area that I think, well, my advice to anyone would be talk about that early on in your design, if you're in Western Australia, obviously, because it's not required through the NCC. So until next year, but just have those conversations early with your builder, and it's a lot about the builder that you select that's open, understands those things. I know a good friend of mine, his daughter's, building a home, and selected a young builder who, they're both aligned. They've got a designer in the city. They want to build sort of a low impact, smaller home, and it's just a matter of getting people aligned on what you're doing, and you can get a great outcome.
You mentioned that you wanted to build a healthy home. So what's that looked like for you in terms of the specification and how that's manifesting itself in the built product?
That's such an interesting and difficult space. We haven't done anything super special, but I think managing mold and moisture is number one. We can't see what happens within the walls, so having a good system for wall management, I think there's going to be a lot of progression in those sorts of areas. There's things like magnetic fields and Wi-Fi and a few things like that I think will do some hard wiring in, so we don't have to be reliant on. So a lot of those sorts of things. Obviously, we're going to have a timber floor. We're going to try to keep VOCs low. There's a few things. I mean, obviously, I spent a bit of time wanting to progress woolen insulation. I think that's possibly got a good future, but we're either going to use rock wool or like a NAF glass wool as insulation. I think that will manage that well. We've still just got plasterboard. There's certainly products that I would have loved to have tried, like Durapanel, those sorts of products. There's a number of products. I think we did a fair bit of research into magnesium oxide board. I think there's a place we're probably going to see some better products, more durable products, more fire-friendly products, and different, there'll be new systems that will come in place that, will probably change building a little bit.
You're insulating your walls, you're also and you're insulating your ceiling. Is that your thermal envelope in terms of where the insulative barrier is?
Yeah, that's right. So we'll just have, I think it's an R6 in the ceiling and an R2.7 in the walls. And it's a pretty standard structure. We've got gyprock. I mean, we've had conversations. Do we go, for just a standard 10 mil, or do we have a or acoustic type gyprock. So yeah, it's fairly standard in those areas.
Have you put a vapor permeable membrane into the walls?
Yes, it's the James Hardy Class 4 vapor permeable.
Yep.
So yeah, and
And
that
then
seems very durable. I think initially the builder said he wasn't, durability was important. So I think those sorts of things that, you do want the wall wrap needs to be there for the long term so it can do its job. I think most of them it's about 6 months. I think UV protection, but yeah, effectively you want that on and you want your cladding on and you want to get it locked up as soon as possible.
awesome. Can we talk about the energy efficiency process? Because I know that you worked with Sid to get that rating done. What did you when you first sort of started working with Sid and you got that feedback? Were there obvious changes that you see that you could make to improve the energy efficiency of the home before you started construction, or were you pretty happy with the star rating and the compliance when it first came out?
There was certainly a lot of back and forth with energy ratings. I think we were under 6 initially, and yeah, we put slab edge insulation, fans and roofs. I think increased U values. We always started with double glazing, and one thing we had the conversation is early on was, do we have a polished concrete slab, and sort of we like the idea of having timber because it was a bit softer underfoot, and obviously we're not going to get any younger. So yeah, I mean that would have improved our energy efficiency. So it was. There's a few interesting things. We brought rammed earth into it. That was one thing. I did a lot of research and went and talked to rammed earth builder not too far away, and we got it quoted and we had systems, but the builder that we selected sort of didn't really want to go down the rammed earth path. He said, I've got issues with flashings and different things. And so we said, all right, well, that's fine. We'll go double brick. So we've just got basically one feature wall on the entrance, and then we've got a brick fireplace. The feature, at one stage we had rammed earth in, we've got another second living area and it was south facing, and it actually made a significant difference to our energy rating. So we went back to a stud wall frame with insulation there, and the change back to brick, because rammed earth, there's no, you can insulate rammed earth, but it's not done very often. But it's one solid unit, so that actually was a negative. And I always thought being south facing, it's not going to get any sun on it. And so there's little things like that actually made a change. We didn't quite get to 7 stars, but we were just short of it. I think if we went to thermally broken doors and windows, we would have gone over 7. It was a significant increased cost, and we're a climate zone 6, but we don't have frost, we don't have extreme temperatures, so I think we can manage that. It's more those dark, gloomy winter days where you're not getting the sun. So we've ended up with, a nice brick fireplace, which will give us a good thermal mass too, the way it'll function.
Yeah, well, you've got such beautiful views from your site, so that lended itself to, and privacy as well. So that lended itself to you having a fair amount of glazing, which I can imagine if you started obviously reducing some of that to look at the ratios of the glazing, that possibly also could have assisted, but then you're not going to be making the most necessarily of the site, are you? So figuring out how you get to live in your home so that you can manage those different temperatures.
And that's sort of something that we probably didn't understand. Well, where does the designer stop and where does the builder start? And I think that's that little bit of grey area in between that definitely if the builder and the designer are in the same room, well, those sort of challenges are solved. And we used an interior designer a little bit late in the process, but it actually brought up a couple of little challenges. Not challenges, it was just a couple, she just picked up a couple of things like, maybe that room should be bigger. Certainly in our mudroom area, we redesigned that, and a little bit around the study. But she did say, oh, wow, these are high level, I don't normally see design drawings at this level. And then, the builder saying, oh, there should be more detail in this.